In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will look at the new features that are available in Active Directory Certificate Services in Windows Server 2008 R2. There are 3 new features included in Active Directory Certificate Services in Windows Server 2008 R2. These are Web Enrollment, Certificate Enrollment across forests, and better support for high-volume CAs. I will look at each of these features individually, starting with Web Enrollment. To understand how web enrollment works, and thus how it can be used, consider how a standard client communicates with other domain members. When you add a computer to the domain, security settings are configured on the client and in Active Directory that allow the client to establish a secure connection between the client and the server they are communicating with. The problem occurs when the client is outside the domain boundary. This could be for 2 reasons. First, the client may not be able to get a direct connection back to the network. That is, the client is mobile and cannot access the company due to a firewall. Most companies would allow the user to connect back to the network using a VPN, but perhaps this is not available, or perhaps the company wants the user to access certificate services without having to worry about using a VPN. The second scenario is when you have a client outside the domain that is not a member of the domain. Perhaps the company has a business partner that they do a lot of work with, and they want to give them a certificate. In this case, the business partner will never be a member of the domain. Web enrollment works by having a server that is available on the Internet using HTTP. Web enrollment provides a proxy-like service to the certificate authority. Since the Web Enrollment Service is on a server that is part of the domain, it can use a secure channel to communicate back to the certificate authority. This means that the certificate authority is never connected directly to the Internet and thus is protected from attack. Before we can start using the new Active Directory Web Enrollment component, your network needs to meet a few requirements. First, your forest functional level needs to be Windows Server 2008 R2 forest level. In order to raise your forest functional level to Windows Server 2008 R2, this essentially means that all domain controllers in your domain need to be Windows Server 2008 R2 or above. The next requirement is that your CA needs to be running Windows Server 2003 or above. For the clients, you require Windows 7 or above. There is one more requirement if you are using certificates across forests. If you do this, the CA needs to be running the Enterprise or Data Center edition of Windows Server. Certificate Services now supports enrollment across forests. Before this, if you wanted to use certificates in 2 different forests, you would need to deploy a separate certificate infrastructure in each forest. Now you can install Active Directory Certificate Services in the one forest and use it in both forests. In order to do this, you require a 2-way transitive trust between the 2 forests. This essentially means that both forests need to be at least Windows Server 2003 functional level. This will allow one forest to issue certificates to the other forest. However, in order to support enrollment, your forest functional level needs to be Windows Server 2008 R2. Enrollment means that the client can automatically obtain a certificate, install it, and start using it. Without enrollment, the user would need to manually obtain the certificate and install it manually themselves. If you already have 2 forests with a separate certificate infrastructure, using enrollment across forests will allow you to remove one of the certificate infrastructures, making your certificate environment a lot simpler. The next new feature is better support for CAs that issue a lot of certificates or high-volume CAs. To understand how this feature works, consider what happens when a certificate is issued by a CA. When a new certificate is generated, a copy is given to the client that requested it and another copy is stored in the certificate database. If you have a CA that issues a lot of certificates, this means a lot of certificates need to be stored in the local certificate database. A larger certificate database means more load on the server. An example of this is Network Access Protection, or NAP. NAP issues health certificates to clients. When a client connects to the network, NAP checks the client to see it meets the minimum requirements to access the network. Checks that are performed are that antivirus software is running and a firewall is enabled. The health certificates that are issued have a short lifespan. This means that multiple certificates could be requested by the same client in the same day. If you have a large network with a lot of clients that all use NAP, that would be a lot of certificates that need to be issued on a daily basis. In order to reduce the load on the CA, the high-volume CA option can be enabled. This essentially means that when a certificate is issued, it is not stored in the certificate database on the certificate authority. This reduces the load on the CA. The disadvantage of this option is that if a certificate is issued and you later on want to revoke this certificate, revoking simply means canceling the certificate so it can no longer be used. You will not be able to do this. Revoking a certificate requires a copy of the certificate to be present in the certificate database. In the case of NAP certificates, the certificates are not valid for very long, so the period of time a certificate could be used or misused is very small. In order to improve performance, a company may decide to switch on the high-volume option and accept the risk associated with not being able to revoke a certificate once it is issued. If you do decide to switch on this option, it is referred to as non-persistent certificate processing and requires Windows Server 2008 R2 or above. If you have a performance problem on your certificate authority servers, this option should improve performance on that CA. This covers the new features included in Windows Server 2008 R2 for Active Directory Certificate Services. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a look at some of our other free videos. For more free videos for this course and others, please feel free to subscribe or visit our website. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.